The Genrich story began in late August 2018. They moved from Fort Bragg to MacDill, a new assignment and excitement for the couple.
It was absolutely stunning. We were very, very happy the first 3 weeks we lived there.
3 weeks?
Yes, 3 weeks before my husband became symptomatic.
Her 36-year-old husband started having headaches, brain fog, and trouble breathing. Doctors didn't know what was wrong.
That's when you begin to realize that this might be what's making you sick, and that you've lived in this home since August.
Jenny Genrich says a leak from their AC caused mold. She'd reported that leak to maintenance with Harbor Bay, which manages the private housing on MacDill. The leak was fixed, but Jenny says there was nothing done to remove areas that were exposed to water and moisture.
I was honestly shocked at what I was seeing. A little scared and a little shocked.
What were you seeing?
I was seeing mold, what appeared to me to be mold on studs, on subflooring, and on pieces of sheetrock. We were scared that maybe he had a tumor or cancer or something was really wrong. Again, we didn't know we had mold.
It wasn't until January that a private doctor diagnosed him with sick building syndrome. At the same time, military families across the U.S. were reporting problems with privatized military housing. MacDill seemed to be ground zero for mold concerns. The Air Force ordered a nationwide review of housing. Families in 97 of the 572 homes on MacDill, 17% reported concerns of mold to the Air Force. 10 News also found an Air Force review that cites mold from construction quality, including moisture from rain, flooding, and leaks from HVAC and refrigerators as the #1 concern for top Air Force leadership during base visits.
It should be a concern. The HVAC is what I believe caused all of these problems.
Their home was remediated in March. This report shows the work that was done. A test after only found a rare level near the AC and stairway, which is common in homes, so they moved back in.
We became symptomatic again, and the testing indicated otherwise, that there was still mold present in the home.
The Genrichs decided they were out. When we visited MacDill in July, we saw this, mold remediation happening in homes on base.
And I do get frustrated when I think about the fact that another family may have moved into that home and it may not have been properly remediated even after we left.
A spokesperson for MacDill told us, quote, initial construction may be one of many factors that caused concern for mold issues in base housing. However, all homes were built to Florida and national building codes as required by law.
Is it really anything different than what you would see across Tampa Bay?
Again, I'm sorry, I really can't talk about ongoing projects.
Stephen Lipson is the industrial hygienist working on MacDill's mold issues. He's not remediating the work, just making sure it's done right.
I like to say there's no such thing as a mold problem, it's a moisture problem. Mold is just what you get when you have one. Speed is the best of all things. When it comes to water intrusion and mold growth, the faster you react to it, the cheaper it is, period.
Jenny Genrich wishes she'd known something, anything about mold. Had she says she'd have pushed harder for maintenance to do more when she first noticed the problems.
In the end, we ended up being the ones to suffer for that. This has really impacted our life.
For military families, there are things that you can do if you think that you have mold. First, contact the Harbor Bay Housing Office and immediately file a work order. You can also download the Active Building app. There you'll see past and current work orders. You can also ask if your house has ever been remediated for mold. Finally, speak up. There is now an advocate hired and employed by the Air Force, not Harbor Bay, to help you. Let them know, let the command know. They do not want this to be a silent issue.
10 Investigates also pressed the private management company about what they're doing to stop this problem. To see their response, check out this story in our 10 News app under 10 Investigates.
just like Democrats had from the very beginning.
All right, Brandy, thank you. You know, we recently also told you this morning about families at JBLM who say they were forced out of their homes because of black mold. This morning, we know an Army Inspector General report is out on the housing situation at JBLM and other military bases as well. And it says families at JBLM who reported bad on-base living conditions felt that they had faced retaliation for coming forward. John Hopperstad is here with more on this morning. John?
Yeah, guys, those families telling the Inspector General in this 30-page report just out this week that they did feel retaliation for coming forward from the private companies who oversee housing at JBLM. Investigators interviewed families across the nation, including dozens of people at JBLM, who say they are dealing with black mold in their homes that is sickening their children and forcing them to move into motels. Now, we have spoken to several moms about this issue who are upset about what they call unlivable conditions in their homes. It includes black mold. At least 46 families have moved out of their homes at JBLM into hotels after finding mold that they say is sickening their children. Now, they started a Facebook page that now has more than 900 members, all telling similar stories. But they say when they went to the private management company that handles housing, their complaints fell on deaf ears.
It just felt like a knife in my gut. Who on earth asks their daughter, who's 2 months old, to be diagnosed with asthma and almost die in her sleep?
Lincoln Military Housing is the private property management company that runs the housing at JBLM. Company is paying for the temporary accommodations, but released a statement saying in part that these families moved out voluntarily and it wasn't because of any health or safety issues. Now, in this report, it did find that housing inspectors often didn't go over things like mold or electricity issues. And this report, again, from the Inspector General goes back to February, looking into complaints about housing conditions. The Army now says it is part of a promise to improve on-base living conditions at all its military installations, including JBLM. Guys?
Well, today,
I'm not good enough to sign.
Calvin and Rachel Kilpatrick never imagined living in military housing might put them and their 4 children in harm's way.
when did you first start noticing the problems in the house?
As soon as we moved in.
The day we moved in.
Rachel, a U.S. Army specialist, took a job repairing medical equipment at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. A year ago, they moved into this house.
When you turned on our shower head, green sludge came out of it.
That was just the beginning.
This ceiling caved in? Yep.
Water leaking from ceilings, from the AC unit, seeping through the back door, termite damage, and worst of all, they say, mold. Their multiple requests for repairs went to Corvius, one of many private companies that manage properties like these.
We kept being told to stay in our lane, but we didn't know what we were talking about.
But then came health problems, trouble breathing, and other symptoms, doctors said, brought on by the mold.
I had to go to the ER 4 or 5 times.
The Military Family Advisory Network conducted a survey and got more than 16,000 responses. 55% had a negative or very negative experience with privatized military housing. Respondents across the country in housing under different management companies describe instances of black mold, lead, even asbestos, and some reported chronic illnesses, including respiratory ailments. Corvius' CEO testified at a congressional hearing last month.
That we let down some of our residents. I am sorry, and we are going to fix it.
In a written statement to NBC News, the company says it's working to reduce the backlog of work orders and improve our response time to service requests. At another hearing this week, Secretary of the Army Mark Esper admitted the Army could have done more.
In too many cases, it is clear the private housing companies failed to uphold their end of the bargain, a failure that was enabled by the Army's insufficient oversight.
Just days after we toured their house out of concern for the Kilpatricks, the garrison commander moved them out and offered them another home on base at no cost.
Families deserve to have a livable home. It just needs to be fixed.
A family like so many others serving their country, but fighting a battle they never expected here at home. Gabe Gutierrez, NBC News, Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.
A military family is frustrated with the mold situation at their Fort Bragg home and turned to CBS 17 to get some help for it.
Our consumer investigator Steve Sprasia is getting to the bottom of those concerns in Fayetteville tonight.
The mold problems date back to February, but didn't really start to take off until earlier this month.
Okay, so all this black stuff here is mold from extensive water damage.
Taylor Paget says the mold here is an extension of the mold problems which burst forth earlier this month in her kids' playroom. She says by the time workmen got around to looking at it, it had gotten worse.
It had spread up the wall. They said they were going to put it in for contracted work because they couldn't find where the leak was coming from.
She says the crew began pulling out wallboard and found more mold.
Anytime it rained, the water started to pour through the wall onto the floor.
A report by an independent third-party house inspector she hired found leaking windows were part of the problem. She says mold was first spotted near the HVAC system in February, and it's been spreading.
You see other mold in the house outside of the area that was originally contaminated?
Yes.
Where?
Underneath my kitchen sink there is mold. In our bedroom windows there is mold. Around the HVAC unit there is mold. So ultimately it's just everywhere.
With mold all over the house, the family was forced into a hotel on base, but she says a new home can't be provided until September 8th.
They want me to go back into my current home on Friday if it's deemed safe, but they tell me that I'm not allowed in my home now to gather any more of my belongings like clothes for my children because it's not safe. So I don't see how in 2 days or 3 days it's going to be safe.
She wants the property management company to pay for mold remediation on all the possessions that her family has stored in the house. She also wants to be moved to a house off post, but the management company says that's not possible. I've touched bases with the management company to find out what they have to say about all of this. Working for you, I'm consumer investigator Steve Sprasia.
All right, Steve, good stuff.
All right, look at these. You remember these photos of mushrooms growing in a bathroom in a house on MacDill? Or how about the mold on an attic door in the ceiling? We have been telling you about questionable living conditions on military bases, including MacDill Air Force right here in Tampa Bay. Today, the Air Force responded with some of what the families who've been affected were asking for: a tenant bill of rights. 10 News reporter Eric Glasser is taking a closer look at the effect that this could have on hundreds of families right here in our area and hundreds of thousands across the nation.
We also did a directed review of all.
On Friday, U.S. Air Force Secretary Heather Wilson got an earful from families living at MacDill Air Force Base about mold, rats, and other issues in their military housing.
They found 23 types of mold in our home at levels unfit for occupancy.
Today, less than a week later, Wilson joined representatives from various branches of the service taking more heat, this time from senators on Capitol Hill.
I know you can fix this problem, but this has to be a top priority.
Part of that fix unveiled today, a tenant bill of rights, putting base commanders and housing operators on notice
what their responsibilities and obligations are.
A draft version lists about a dozen new rules ensuring safe living conditions, an on-base advocate, attentive property managers, and convenient methods to file complaints. Repairs should be made promptly. If not, rent could now be withheld. Disputes handled through mediation, privately, and without fear of reprisal. Of course, Tampa Bay is home to lots of military families, both active and retired. So ask folks at places like the American Legion here in Madeira Beach what they think about a tenant bill of rights, and they'll tell you it's long overdue.
They should definitely take care of the military. They've taken care of us all this time.
I mean, they go through enough when they're over in the battle zones and everything. They don't need to put up with dirt here, too.
The people who are living in there have the expectation of living in a safe, healthy environment.
The issues aren't just at MacDill. There have been similar problems reported at bases around the nation across all branches of service. Most of the housing is owned or managed by private companies who military leaders promise will now be held more accountable.
I want to make sure that the generations that come behind us can feel like every base is home and it's safe.
And this same tenant bill of rights could also be extended to individual members of the military, whether they live in barracks or in a house. Officials said those serving our country deserve clean, safe, and dependable living space.